Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm going to cover a couple Second Amendment issues today, and that would be the recent Supreme Court ruling, or I should say not a ruling, and also a 2A rally or peaceful protest that's going to be happening soon in South Carolina. So first of all, the Supreme Court ruling. If you guys remember, there was a law in New York City that had to do with if you were transporting a lawfully owned and locked up handgun outside of the city, they had some vague and very restrictive rules that involved where you could stop when you were on the way to your destination, say it was to your second home outside of the city, right? And they said, well, maybe you could stop for a cup of coffee, but only things that were reasonably necessary. So what if you stopped for dinner, but it was at your parents' house and you decided to stay for 4 or 5 hours? There was tons of vagueness in this ordinance, city ordinance, that was carrying the force law in New York City. Not to mention it is completely unconstitutional and clearly restricted the right to keep and bear arms. Well, gun rights groups brought this up to the Supreme Court. And right around the time that they did, New York City instantly said, nope, we're going to take back the law. We're going to just rescind it on our own. Therefore, in their opinion, making the case moot, meaning not relevant, so why even talk about it, right? Well, what made this court interesting was this. First of all, some of the plaintiffs had already been harmed by this statute, both monetarily and with their time and other things like that. And second of all, it's the bigger picture here, because basically what New York City was doing is playing fast and loose with procedures and things like that. Because the gist of it was they wanted to infringe on New Yorkers' Second Amendment rights. Clearly, that was the intent of their ordinance. But as soon as they found out they might get overruled, and that it might set future precedents to help preserve the Second Amendment, both in New York City and across the United States, they said, no, I don't think so. See, our law is so draconian and so unconstitutional, they're probably going to overturn it, and that's actually going to help gun rights. But see, in New York City, we're all about restricting them. So that's the conundrum they were put in. So they pulled the law out, and then they petitioned the Supreme Court and said, you shouldn't even be hearing this case. And the legal terminology for that is moot, because it's just not relevant and it doesn't matter anymore. Well, here's what happened. Some of the justices brought up, as well as the gun rights groups that were advocating for the petitioners to the court, they said, you know what? No, these people have been harmed. And yes, by removing the law, did actually make remedy on some of their harm, but there's still harm that wasn't addressed or taken care of. And we don't want to set this precedence that they can just make a law, and then as soon as they're going to get busted on it, and it's going to help the Second Amendment by setting precedents from the high court of the land, right? That we're just going to withdraw it? That's not how these things are supposed to work, so we want to still hear it. Well, they decided today whether they were going to have a full hearing and actually decide this case. And unfortunately, they said no. The Supreme Court did find that this was moot since New York City retracted this unconstitutional law right after they found out they were busted, if you know what I mean. So, this is not good news for the Second Amendment. Not at all, because it basically says that if there's a case that's going to become a benchmark case and actually overturn a tyrannical law, but yet help the rest of the country, because the Supreme Court decisions are binding for all lower courts in the whole country, right? That they can just pull it away real quick. Not to mention the fact that Heller and McDonald, these are the two big Supreme Court cases that we cling on to that some people look to as like hope, right? That there's still somewhat of the court having the Second Amendment's back. Those have been getting widely ignored by the lower courts over and over and over again. And this was going to kind of re-bona fide, if you will, the Heller and McDonald cases that are wildly ignored, and some of the justices are noting that. Well, the vast majority of the court, to be honest, ruled against the Second Amendment, but there were 3 dissenters. Clarence Thomas, he's always pro-2A. Alito, he's always pro-2A. And Gorsuch all dissented and said, no, we should still hear this, because A, this was a very unconstitutional law, and this needs addressed, and B, it's not moot, because even though retracting the law did provide some remedy to the plaintiffs, it did not provide full remedy. And if there's still damages to plaintiffs, we still need to hear it, because it's not okay to just provide a little bit of remedy. You know, people like Alito also mentioned things, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, that, you know, there's been a lot of infringements on the Second Amendment, and the McDonald and Heller aren't exactly being upheld. He also didn't really like the way that New York did this. where they tried to get the law in there, and then they used a bunch of weird procedures to make this a complicated, muddy case, and then they retracted it real quick. Like, it's obvious to Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch that New York City was playing a fast one. And you're not supposed to play a fast one with our God-given, unalienable rights, endowed upon us by our Creator, right? And these justices express that. Now, Kavanagh, here's an interesting one. He voted to not finish hearing this case because he believed it was now moot, but he did write a separate opinion that was kind of not with the dissent and also not with the majority, stating that he did believe that New York's ordinance violated the Second Amendment, and he did have a problem with the ordinance. He was just going to vote to not hear it any further because since they removed the law, that it was moot. However, always try to be an optimist, guys. This is not a good thing that happened today. But if there is a silver lining, we do have 4 justices, 3 that dissented today, which is a good thing, and 1 that didn't dissent but said that this was unconstitutional with Kavanagh. There are 4 justices now that do see some of the infringements on the Second Amendment. And some people say, I was reading some legal scholarly opinions, that the Supreme Court was actually helping the Second Amendment by doing this. Now, this is not what I see. I'm just throwing this out there. I think this is a bunch of BS, okay? But just so you guys can think about it this way, because it was presented in some of the articles I read. There was tons of messy procedural things with this particular New York case that was going to really muddy it up and make it where the case could have been about more than just the Second Amendment. Now, there's other Second Amendment cases that are being petitioned for the Supreme Court to grant certiorari so that they'll hear it, in other words. And they're thinking that maybe people like Kavanagh said, we're going to back out of this one because it's not going to be very clear-cut victory. And we'd hate for it to lose and set bad precedents against the Second Amendment. They're just waiting for a little bit cleaner case where they can reinforce McDonald, Heller, and obviously shall not be infringed. I don't know if that's what they're doing or not. I'm sick and tired of everyone saying they're playing 3D chess, but that is another perspective to look at it from. So Kavanagh says, hey, I've still got the Second Amendment's back. I just believe this was moot. Alito, Gorsuch, and Clarence Thomas said, nope, we know the game that New York City was playing. This was completely unconstitutional no matter how you look at it, and we wanted to hear it and overrule it. So that's what happened. Now that's 4. 3 that dissented, 1 that said, well, he didn't believe it was, he believed it was moot. He didn't believe they should hear it, but he did believe it violated, so you can kind of say he's the 4th pro-gun guy-ish. Yeah, this is a mess, guys. But then we have Chief Justice Roberts. He's supposed to be the conservative. He's supposed to be the 5th vote that's going to protect the Second Amendment. That they didn't give us, but that they're supposed to protect, right? Ultimately, we're the ones that need to protect because Roberts, he goes with the liberals many times. I don't know if he's pro-gun or not. He might be, but I'm not so sure. Kavanagh, he might be a little more, but I'm not so sure. But it seems like right now there's Gorsuch, there's Thomas, there's Alito that have our back, which is great. But you know what? We can't count on 3, 4, 5 people. We all need to have the back of the Second Amendment. So that's kind of what happened. My take on it. We'll see what happens. 3D chess, I don't know. I'm getting sick and tired of hearing all this crap, aren't you guys? I'm just getting sick and tired of all of it. Shall not be infringed means only one thing to me, and I don't need people in robes to decide it. But hey, that's the country we live in. That's our form of the political side of things, and supposedly the non-political court that I believe is probably very political. So you guys can think about it. I just wanted to bring your attention what happened. I'm not happy with it. I'd love to be proven wrong, that there was some masterful 3D chess played by Kavanagh and Roberts, and we'll find out in the future, because hindsight's 20/20, that what they did is going to be the best thing ever. I'm always optimistic, but I'm not so sure. I don't trust people in robes to preserve my rights. I think it's time for all of us to keep preserving our own rights and to get together, like I've always said. And speaking of having each other's back, here's the other topic briefly. As you guys know, I live in Michigan. And I tend to do more Michigan gun rights things because it's my state, right? But I have a lot of good viewers, people I call my friends. And this is a post that I just got, a comment in one of my videos from a friend of the channel and a regular viewer named Outdoors with Tim. And he's from South Carolina. So this is for the South Carolina guys, okay? I'm not putting you last. It's just the Supreme Court applies to everybody. And I don't know how many South Carolina guys there are. But I have South Carolina's back, and I wanted to pass on this information because I'm a small channel. We're all a bunch of nobodies, but a bunch of nobodies together might be able to make a difference. So here's me giving a shout out to South Carolina, trying to help you guys out. So he basically said, just wanted to make sure I got you the right information. There will be a Second Amendment peaceful protest rally being held at the South Carolina State House May 1st, 2020, high noon, 12 p.m. Firearms are welcome. Concealed carry must have permit, and long guns are welcome. There will be no firearms allowed on the state grounds. If you or anyone is planning to attend the rally, they are asked not to bring firearms into the state grounds. Anyone carrying a firearm will have to stay on the public access areas. So I assume there's an access around this house building, right? So the moral of the story is this. South Carolina, okay? At your state house, May 1st, 2020, high noon, peaceful armed protest. You're encouraged to carry firearms, concealed, with permit, open carry. I don't know the laws of State Carolina. You guys need to know your own laws. So lawfully, peacefully, but armed. And this is standing up for the Second Amendment and letting people in South Carolina know that you're not going to tread on our rights. Not in South Carolina anyways. So there you go. He also said there's a Facebook group called 2A Strong South Carolina. So he says if you just type into the Facebook search 2A Strong South Carolina, you're going to find that this rally, peaceful protest, is on Facebook, and you guys can get involved. So South Carolina citizens, I care about you guys. A lot of you guys are my friends. We need to protect our God-given rights in all of these 50 states. So I'm going to keep fighting here in Michigan. You guys have offered me a lot of support, and the fellow Michiganders. Michigan stands with South Carolina. I stand with South Carolina. I urge all of you guys to go, have fun, and be safe. And, you know, if you guys know more about this, you people that live in South Carolina, you can put it down in the comments of this video just to help each other out. I'm going to try to spread the word, and definitely know that I have you guys' back in the great state of South Carolina. So good luck. May 1st, high noon. This is at the State House building. And yeah, God bless South Carolina. All right, guys. We'll talk about this stuff more. There's always stuff going on, but we're going to call out bad stuff when it happens here, and we're going to try to be optimistic when we can. So I'm optimistic to know that South Carolina is standing up. I'm kind of bummed out at these so-called conservative justices. So think about it. Decide for yourselves what's going on, guys. All right. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.